This story has photos, unfortunately. My husband Jim and I own an antique business in a big old bazaar barn of a building. 5 floors, multiple other tenants, including a restaurant. Halloween was a Monday last year. We locked the business up at 5 p.m. and we went on an early dinner across town. Then we got a call from Sonetrol, our security monitoring company, at 6:30. The motion detected on the lower level. Then another. We left in a tearing hurry, but figured it's a bird or a rat. We don't have rats, but you know, something. Maybe a cat. It's way too early for a break-in, after all. I went inside the main level upstairs and disarmed the alarm, and started fumbling noisily with the keys and the big iron gate. One of many that separate the floors at night. Jim checked the perimeter outside for signs of a break-in. Nothing. Doors and windows intact. Definitely, absolutely a bird, or a rat, or a cat. Dusk was long gone. The shadows had settled in and taken over. Just wardrobes loomed in the dark. Wardrobes and nothing more, right? I headed down below to the location of the alarm, trusting Jim would follow. After all, it was a rat, or a cat, or a bird. I'm accustomed to the building after dark, so I just turned on my phone light, not the overheads, and walked around boldly like I owned a place. I looked in the corner of the motion detector. Nothing. Just its red eye blinking mindlessly at me. No rats, no cats, no birds. I turned and went the other way, whilst Jim poked around a few aisles over. And there it was. A burglary kit sitting in the middle of the floor. Bolt cutters, a fire extinguisher, just sitting there, waiting. I have never gotten a bigger case of sheer terror so fast. After all, there was no broken window or door, so he was still there, in the dark, with me. I hissed,
Jim, please.
and he didn't hear me. I literally couldn't scream, just like in those stupid goddamn dreams. My voice stuck. Just me, the spotlit burglary tools, and a hostile presence lurking in the dusty shadows, watching, whilst I whispered for someone to save me. Finally, 1,000 years, or maybe 10 seconds later, Jim wondered why I had taken root in the hallway and came to see. He saw what I was frozen pointing at, and was like, "Oh fuck." We bolted out of the front door to call 911 and wait, and we abandoned the building to the burglar. An eternal 5 minutes later, the police showed up, and were initially pretty unimpressed with our find of the crowbar and fire extinguisher. Until we pulled up the security footage that revealed the actual horror. The face of my new sleep paralysis demon, I share with you. So, this guy, as is obvious, he is built like a lean, mean brick shithouse. He'd crouched on a landing behind a bookcase when we closed, and watched me and my staff lock up. Bided his time, then calm as could be, he walked out and went to the men's restroom in the hallway downstairs. That area isn't set for motion detection for a variety of reasons. He spent a while in there moving around with the door open. He constructed the mask using one of ours, and a fake flower wreath to hold it on. Purple plastic clematis. He looked right into the camera barefaced, and then put the mask on, stared at it fixedly in his mask for a time, and finally pulled his gloves on. He stacked a few solid body vintage suitcases in front of a tall iron gate and hopped right over, like it was nothing. He ran down the hall, triggering the 6:30 silent alarm, and looped the floor. He ran back into the hall and moved a ladder to hop back to the other side of the gate, and, bizarrely, just repeated this whole thing a few times. Then he went to the basement, wormed over a 15-inch gap over yet another iron gate, Back to the hall again, stared into the camera more. Repeat. He was moving fast, up and over, back and forth, upstairs and downstairs, parkour style almost. Then he got the tools out and peeled apart one of our steel lockboxes with a crowbar and stole a handful of our keys to access showcases. At this point, he heard me fumbling with a gate and keys upstairs. He ditched the stolen keys and tools and hid, watching me whilst he waited in the dark. We exited to call 911 and he ran back to the basement. In the basement, there is access to a dirt tunnel that circles the perimeter of the building. He broke the door open and entered. Spiders the size of dinner plates live in there. He had no light. It's muddy and dank. It's, in a word, petrifying. There is a tiny exit hatch if you walk the whole thing and take the multiple turns that dumps you into the busy kitchen of a restaurant, whereupon one would need to stroll past the line of cooks out into the restaurant with cameras, and then one could leave the restaurant front door, plastered with mud, which does leave tracks, speaking from experience. When we found it, there was his clear entrance into the tunnel, but no exit tracks, no muddy footprints, nobody walking out on the restaurant cameras, and the cooks noticed nothing. It was a busy night though. Reviewing the footage, timing it all, tracing his path from camera to camera, and searching the building carefully took hours. By the end, all of us, including the police, were starting to lose our collective cool and freak out. There was no chill, when even the guys with guns were rattled. After all, where the fuck did he go? Jim and the two officers had no choice but to walk the dirt tunnel. The cops took one look and were like, "Absolutely not." Jim insisted, and so they made him walk point. They made it through about half of the tunnel before the cops said, "Fuck no, you're leaving with us and we're going to review more footage from the restaurant where there are no spiders, and fuck this." Jim got the okay from them to board up both ends of the tunnel, which he did, solidly. And thus the story ends. The pictures were spread widely, but we got no useful leads, despite the decent face shot. Did he indeed crawl out a hatch in the busy kitchen and stroll out past the cooks, leaving no trace of mud? I guess. We had no suspicious smells coming out of the tunnel in later weeks and months, but nobody has walked the far side since. We only unboarded the tunnel last week for the split water main shenanigans pictured in the most recent link. I have vowed I will use his skull in this year's Halloween display if he's found dead down there. Before I continue with the final story, if you've enjoyed this video so far, please leave a like, a comment, and subscribe to see future content from me, as well as help me in the algorithm. Thank you. It was my turn to take my kids trick-or-treating. The previous year, it was my wife's, and we traded back and forth every year. My son and daughter are aged 7 and 9. Usually, I stayed on the street whilst my kids went up to the different houses to collect candy. After about half an hour of walking around, we came to one of the more popular hotspots for candy collecting, a main street in the neighbourhood. Lots of really cool decorations and animatronics on people's lawns, so I became a bit distracted and stopped watching my kids as closely. At one point, they came back from a house, accompanied by another girl, about the same height as my daughter. She was wearing a weird homemade mask, like a cardboard cutout or something. My daughter asked me if she could trick-or-treat with us, so I said sure, and we carried on together as a group. I didn't know who this girl was, but I figured she was a friend from school. As we continued, I started to notice a large man trailing us. He was wearing some sort of angry cat mask. It was kind of creepy, to be honest. I thought that maybe he was the father of the girl, so I tried to start up some small talk with him. I said something like, "Nice weather, eh?" But he didn't respond. He just stood there staring at me, whilst our kids went up the stairs to the next house. I tried again, asking, "Hey, is that your daughter?" He nodded, but didn't say anything. I figured he just wasn't in the mood for chatting, so I stopped trying. We carried on for about 15 more minutes, until suddenly, my kids came up to me and said they wanted to go home. This surprised me, as we hadn't been out for too long, and their bags were only about a third full. In any case, I agreed, waved goodbye to the man in a cat mask and his daughter, and started on our way home. The weird thing is that when I glanced back, the man and his daughter were just standing there, staring at us. I checked one more time as we turned the corner, and they were still standing there, not having moved at all. At this point, I decided to ask my kids, "So who was that girl?" My daughter looked up at me, with a confused expression on her face. "She's your friend," my daughter replied. I asked her what she meant. Apparently, the girl with the cardboard mask approached them and said she was a friend of mine. She told my daughter she was too shy to ask me if she could join us to trick-or-treat, and wanted my daughter to ask me instead. I laughed at this story and said to my daughter, "Why would you think she was my friend? I don't have any child friends." What my daughter said next chilled my bones. According to her, when the girl with the cardboard mask approached them for the first time, she wasn't wearing the mask, so they were able to see her face. As it turns out, she wasn't a girl at all, but an older woman around my age, with wrinkles on her face. What's even more disturbing is the old woman had started to steal treats from my daughter's bag, apparently when I wasn't looking. This is why they asked me if we could go home. The old woman was creeping them out, and they wanted to just get away from her. I brought my kids home and told my wife what had happened. We made sure to check for all their candy, but didn't find anything suspicious or off. We didn't call the police or anything, since nothing really happened. But thinking back, I kind of regret the decision now. What the heck was the old woman doing? And who the hell was that man following us around? I don't think I'll ever know. I just think it's sick that there are people out there on Halloween, hiding behind masks, pretending to be children.